Well, hey crafty friends, it's Hiedi Scott with DiyDreaming, and on this video we are going to make some pretty shelf sitters using oysters. We're going to also use some of these napkins because I love this print. It's a Marimekko IHR print. And then we're going to be using either some gold or silver paint and some of this stuff. This is glittering white chalk paste that makes the oysters look so much prettier than they look when you either get one at a restaurant or at the grocery store or you order it online. So I'll tell you the whole thing. I'm planning to ramble. Okay, so let's start with the oysters. Where can you get oyster shells? You can get them at the grocery store and prepare oysters at home. You can get them at restaurants. If you don't eat oysters, you can ask a restaurant if they have any that are left over. For me, I think the easiest thing to do is to order them on Amazon. And I've been doing that for several years, and I have not really figured out which ones are the best. So sometimes they're really heavy, sometimes they're really quite large. These are the largest. This is the next size down. And sometimes they're like this, kind of flat and smaller. This is what we'll be using today. But I will drop in the comments my Amazon links for all these different sizes of oyster shells. They come, when you order them online on Amazon, they come all washed and ready to go. They usually will be a little bit dusty. But anyway, so this set, these are the ones that we'll be using today. These are kind of flat, and they're great for these shelf sitters that we're going to be making. All right, so we won't use that one because it's got a barnacle on it. Let me find a good one so I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is basically what the surface is going to look like when you get these particular shells. And the first thing I do is I make them sort of opalescent by just rubbing a little bit of chalk paste on this white part. And this is miracle stuff. Look at that. Can you see that? This is what it looked like before. Here's a good example. See, this one is just kind of flat, and this one is opalescent. So you just rub a little bit of this on this shell too. It takes just a few seconds to dry. And I think it makes a huge difference. And you can use this for stenciling. I don't know how I stumbled on that idea of using it for this type of a project. I needed something, and I was like, well, what do I have that's white and opalescent looking? And I was like, the only thing I really have on hand is chalk paste. So put that on these right here. Okay, so then I have this. I have been working this whole morning to get ready. I have everything all ready to go in stages. Let's hit these real quick with some hot air. Okay, so there's lots of different surfaces that you could use. What I think would have been the very best would have been some of these chunky stretch canvases. I get these at Walmart in the craft section. They come a set of 4. They're usually under $10 for 4 of them. This one I've painted, so ignore that. But anyways, this would be the most ideal, but I didn't have any of these that weren't already involved in some other type of crafting. Okay, so then next up what you could use are, these are different shapes of little shelf sitters that you can get from magnoliadiy.com. These would work, and they come pre-painted. Or you could use any kind of piece of wood. It could be a cut up 2x4. It could be a piece of this particle board. And this is what we're going to use. So, but we're going to use rectangles. I painted 2 coats of white paint on the front, sides, and back of the 2 ones that we'll be using. Then, and it can be any white paint. I just used this white paint that I had on hand. Then I painted the edges because I really like this look. And I'm using gold today. So I painted 2 coats. This is from Walmart. It's Folk Art Treasure Gold. And the color is gold. It's great. It's nice and thick. Or you could use silver if you wanted. This is the same thing, basically. So I painted. This is what we'll be working on. Front, back, sides, and then I did the gold paint. And you can see it's kind of messy. It does not matter at all. Okay, so we'll be working on this one. But I'm going to show you that step, this next step. Okay, so then here's another one that I have ready to go. I am going to use a little bit of Mod Podge. This little bottle, I believe I picked up at Dollar Tree, but you can get Mod Podge in several brands. Sorry, I'm looking for a brush. In several brands at pretty much any craft store, or if you don't have any, you can just ask Mr. Google how to make Mod Podge at home with white school glue, and he will tell you. But it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be glossy, matte, whatever you have. Okay, so I'm painting this side with a coat of this Mod Podge, and then let me dry it, and we'll set it aside, and we'll work on our oyster shells. And hopefully what you're going to see is just that this is so super simple. Okay, I'm going to let this dry for a little bit. Set it right there. Okay, so these have been treated with my glittering white chalk paste. And let's start on this bigger one. I'm using my gold, Treasure Gold, and a little paintbrush. And what I have found is that these take generally 2 coats. I am just going to go around the edges. If your oyster shells are really sharp, you can use a file or a sanding block to sand down the edges a little bit. And this is kind of one of those personal preference things. Do you like your line around the edge of the oyster shell to be thick? If you do, then make it thick. If you like it thinner, then make it thinner. It is totally up to you. Okay, so here is the start. And at this little top point, I generally just like to paint that whole thing. I'll hold this up in just a second and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, and let's talk about, while this is drying for a second, these little things. If you don't like these little purpley kind of blob things that are in the inside of oyster shells, you can paint them with white paint before you put on the glittering white chalk paste, and that will cover it up. But if I'm going to decoupage the actual oyster shell, then I will sometimes do that. But generally, I like the look of it. So let me show you a few things that I've made. These are not oyster shells. These are gigantic scallop shells that just have the edges painted, and they have decoupaged napkins on them. This was a set of napkin rings that I made, gosh, at least 5 years ago. And this was a set of oyster shells that I ordered from Amazon that had a pre-drilled hole in them. Here are a couple other oyster shell projects. And I am sure on these that I painted those white, these things white before I did the decoupage, because otherwise you would see it through the napkin. So I have done so many oyster shell projects over the years. Those are just a few that I have handy. Okay, let me dry this and then we'll do another coat. Okay, and you can see what I was talking about just a minute ago. I generally just paint the top of this. You could also paint the back of the shell if you wanted. You don't have to, but you certainly could. Let me get my fingers cleaned off. You can also do oyster shells, oh shoot, with gold leaf. You can do them with a pin. There's a lot of different ways to do this edging. The painting just really is the easiest. And probably the most affordable way also. And I have a project over here that I want to show you that I did last summer, I believe it was, that I hope will give you some creative ideas for how you can use these. So I made this project, and I hope you can tell what it's supposed to represent. It's a nativity scene on just a block that I painted. I think this is agave Waverly paint. This is the folk art, this gold on the edge. And then these are smaller oyster shell, oyster shells that I did that treatment with the white, the glittering white chalk paste, and I painted the edges. And then I put these on here using, ooh, this one's a little loose, using hot glue and E6000, and I added this starfish to represent the star. So there's so many things that you can do. You can keep it really simple or you can go elaborate with it. Okay, let's move on. Let's set this aside so it can dry a little bit more. Let's move on to the next step, which is where it gets really fun, so stay with me. Let me grab my iron and my ironing board. And actually, I'm not going to use the ironing board. I'm just going to use my iron. Okay, so this is the one that you can see it's kind of shiny that I painted my Mod Podge on, and it is fully dry. All right, and I love these napkins. I love, 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 love these. I think I bought them at a pretty gift shop in Alpharetta. They're just abstract. I think the blue looks great with the gold. These are 3-ply. So first thing you need to do is get all 3 plies separated. And I actually ironed mine so it would be easier to work with. Okay, so let's remove the very back ply gently. Okay, and then let's remove the next ply. If you don't get all of the plies off, then it's not going to lay flat. It's going to kind of bubble a little bit. So you want to get all the way down to just the one printed ply. And one thing I've found, and maybe you've discovered this too, is that the napkins that you can buy someplace like Dollar Tree, they are typically just going to be 2-ply. But when you're buying a nice brand like these, they are typically always going to be 3-ply. So make sure you get that off. Okay, and then I'm just going to kind of figure out, where do I want this to lay? I think right there. Okay, so I'm going to get a piece of parchment paper. Have you guys discovered these yet? They come from Dollar Tree. I love them. They're great for crafting on. $1.25, you get 25 sheets of pre-cut parchment paper that are perfect for doing all kinds of crafts. So I'm protecting my iron, which I probably have it set a little bit too high. It should be just a little bit over cotton. And when you put your hot iron over the top, it's going to reactivate that dried Mod Podge. And it's going to basically almost melt the napkin into it. So now I'm going to get some scissors. And I know this seems like a lot of steps, but it just is steps that you have to do, but nothing hard here. And this is a super affordable craft. Super. Okay, so here's my little piece. And I'm just going to use a file, this little mini sander thing, to just go over the edges. You can also just cut your decoupage napkin off, but I find this is the easiest way to get it to come off. Okay, so this is what that looks like. And use a napkin. I want to add a little bit more of gold paint edging around the sides. So I am going to pull out a paper plate, and this is just a little palette knife from Dollar Tree. We'll use it to do the edges, and then we'll talk about how we're going to put our oyster on here. Just need a very little amount of paint. This back down here so I don't burn myself. Okay, so I have a blob of gold paint. I'm going to dip my palette knife in it. And then I'm just going to go around the edges. You hold it like this. This is why it didn't matter when I was getting this all ready to go if I had painted the edges first. Because I knew I'd be coming back to add some more. Okay. All right, and that looks pretty good. Let's hit it with some heat for just a second. This is going to be petite, but I think it's gonna look really nice. So here's the oyster shell that we painted the edges, and I used the glittering white chalk paste in the center to make it look pearly. And it is just gonna go right here to make sure it stays on there forever. I am going to add a little bit of E6000 and my hot glue. I need to get some more little tubes of this E6000. So it was super easy. It started its life just as a little block of this what is this stuff called? Wood fiberboard type thing. It got 2 coats of white paint over the front, back, and sides. Then I added 2 coats of gold paint on the edges. Then I painted some Mod Podge on the front. I let that dry. I laid my napkin over the top of that and ironed it. Filed the edges off. And then I used some E6000 and some hot glue to attach my oyster shell that I had put this pearly stuff that is called glittering white chalk paste on it and painted the edges with that same paint, and that was it. And you could do this kind of a project on any type of a flat surface. It could be a canvas, it could be a shelf sitter, it could be something like this. You could do a combination of oyster shells to create like a nativity or some other scene, or just a single one. You can paint those little purple blobs that are in the center before you move on to the next steps. If you don't like that, I do personally like the look of that, and that's it. So let me know if you would like my supply list, if you have questions. I probably won't do anything else to it. There's no need to spray it or to put a varnish or anything on it, because it's not going to ever be put in water. It's just going to sit on a shelf. You could also put a little hanger on the back if you wanted to hang it. And you could do a much larger size if you wanted, and use a much larger oyster shell. Oh, and let me know if you would like to look on Amazon at the oyster shells that I have ordered before in the past. All right, do this or this. Feel free to sprinkle, feel free to ask me any questions. I hope you liked this quick and easy project. I do, it turned out great. It could look completely different depending on what style napkin you use. It could be gold, silver, copper, rose gold, absolutely whatever appeals to you. All right, have a blessed and wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for watching.